There's no doubt that the world loves crossovers and SUVs, and recently manufacturers have started a trend of putting a third row on their original 5-seater SUVs. Think of the 7-seat Honda CR-V and the Mitsubishi Outlander. Now Volkswagen wants in on that game, as this is a 2019 Volkswagen Tiguan Allspace.
Stretched 215mm or 8.5 inches, the Allspace is the only car in its class with a modified wheelbase to accommodate those extra seats. Also, if you're watching this from the US, then the term Allspace will be unfamiliar. That's because this is actually your standard-sized Tiguan. Spec levels are excellent, with all models getting LED headlights, an electric tailgate, keyless access, and the necessary safety features such as AEB with pedestrian detection and lane assist.
Now pricing is a bit of a mixed bag because you would expect this to cost more than the standard size Tiguan, but it depends because Volkswagen dropped that base model from our range, so you can only get the more powerful 132 TSI Comfort line, whilst the Tiguan Allspace you can still get in a less powerful 110 guise. And in that specification, it's $3,000 cheaper than the standard size Tiguan. So essentially you get more car, but less power. Whether you like VW or not, you have to admit they build pretty nice interiors, and the Tiguan Allspace is no different. Everything feels really well screwed together, all the critical touch points are nice and soft, and there's hardly any panel gaps, and where there are, they're small and consistent. There are also nice touches such as the felt lining on the door card, and there's not a stupid amount of shiny plastic, which I really appreciate. The interior though is a symphony of black. Almost everything is black except for these small chrome highlights. A few more colors and textures definitely wouldn't go unnoticed. And there's nothing in here that will make you go ooh with excitement, but they will do one thing well, is age really nicely. A lot of cars with crazy sweeps and curves, after a few years they will look outdated, but the Tiguan should keep you happy for many years to come. In front of you is the same 3-spoke steering wheel that a lot of VWs have used throughout the years. It's flat-bottomed and lined in this really nice soft leather. On the right, controls for Bluetooth and telephone, and on the left, active cruise control. Although I will say, whilst using it, these plus and minus buttons control speed, but they only work in increments of 10. And whilst trying to find out how to change it in increments of 1, I finally realized that the resume button doubles as that feature. In a lot of cars, the plus and minus buttons work up by 1 kilometer increments, and if you hold them, then it goes up by 5 or 10, and I think VW should implement that into its system. There are paddle shifters, left and right, and if you hold it for 2 seconds, the right paddle, it goes back to automatic. In front of us is the active driving display, and it's funny that only a few years ago you could only get that on the top of the range Audis, and here it is as standard in a family-sized SUV. And I think it looks fantastic. VW have one of the best sort of applications for these sort of screen driving displays. My favorite one would have to be the navigation in the center with the smaller dials. I think it looks really cool.
With the digital display, when you switch off the car, there's also a cool little graphic that shows up, which displays your distance traveled and your total traveling time. In the center is the infotainment system. Our Highline trim gets the larger 9.2-inch system, whilst lower models get the smaller 8-inch unit, but the features are almost identical. So for radio, there's AM and FM, but annoyingly no digital radio. For media, with Bluetooth streaming, what I like is that even though it's streaming from Spotify, there's still good metadata from the band, the album, the song name, and even some of the cover art. And there's also different sources. In the glove box, there's the CD and SD cards, if you still use those. And there's also an aux jack further below. Apple CarPlay and Android Auto are also standard, and that's accessed through App Connect. It will also launch automatically when you plug in the USB to your phone. Our car also gets the upgraded Dyna audio system. It does mean you lose this storage cubby as it's replaced with a speaker, but I think it sounds really good. The only thing is, if you enable Dolby Pro Logic 2, it does sound over-bassed. It kind of overpowers everything else. So my suggestion, turn that off and adjust the settings manually. Also keep in mind this screen is a fingerprint and dust magnet, so keep a cloth handy in the car. Below are the climate controls, real dead easy to use. Physical knobs which control the temperature for the driver and front passenger. One push sync. You can also control fan speed or push it into auto. Below there's 2 USB ports and an auxiliary jack. There's also a 12-volt power port. There's a small cubby which is big enough to store my iPhone 8. And DSG shifter, park all the way down to drive, straight line, also sport mode, and to the left for Tiptronic. Electronic parking brake with auto hold, and auto start off, self-parking, which I'll show a little bit later, and push for the 360 camera. And it's stitched together really well. There's not too much distortion until you get to the real edges. Regular viewers will also know how much I like trick cup holders, and the Tiguan Allspace delivers. Behind the door, there's a good size area for bulkier items, but if you want to store drinks, push the button and it rotates and out comes the holders, and they're also adaptive. And they also go back in, simple as that. Underneath the driver's armrest, good amount of storage, and the bottom is also texturized. And this also doubles as an adjustable height armrest. Alright, chug test time. We've got our 1 litre Fat Boy Gatorade. Let's see if it fits anywhere inside the cabin. So, driver's door card, easy. In the center, if you deploy the cup holders, then no, it doesn't fit. So just make sure they're retracted. And it will kind of nestle in there. I'll consider it as a pass, at least it holds it. Underneath the armrest, no. And glove box, yes. So, 3 out of 4, that's a pass. Above the driver, sun visor with vanity mirror and LED lights. There's also a card holder. But the big question is, do they extend? The answer is no. So, as you can see, kind of useless for tall people like me. In the center, there's this huge cubby, which is big enough to store 2 big pairs of sunglasses. And if that's not enough for you, there's an even larger one behind it. I'm not sure exactly what you'd put in there, so yeah, carrot. There we go. Now, Volkswagen spare no effort in telling you that the Tiguan Allspace is a 7-seater. But unless you wanted to torture them, save these seats strictly for children. Now, I know I'm not the target market to sit in these third rows, but even someone significantly shorter than me wouldn't have a great time. And I've got this seat scooched forward. If this was all the way back, I actually wouldn't know who would be able to fit. The backrests are also really upright and they can't be reclined. And keep in mind, parents, if anyone sits in the back, make sure they have their rear headrests deployed, because the heads are almost resting directly on the rear glass. Finally, only the left-hand side passenger gets a cup holder. The right-hand side passenger gets this tiny shelf. I'm not exactly what you'd put in there. But there is a decent-sized window, but there are no rear air vents. Although these seats are at least somewhat lifted off the ground, so smaller children should be able to put their feet underneath the second row. But adults like me, we've got our knees in our face. Life for second row passengers is much better. 3-zone climate control means the rear seat passengers get their own temperature controls, and there are also heated outboard rear seats. But there's only one USB port in the back. There is a 12-volt power outlet next to it, but I find that mostly redundant, especially in the rear seats. I would happily swap that for another fast-charging USB. Same with the front, huge door pockets, which are also lined with felt, and 2 tray tables, which I think the kids will really love. And they have their own cup holder. But the thing is, for a car that's been stretched over 20 centimeters, I did expect more rear seat legroom. This driver's seat is set for my driving position. I'm 6'3" or 190 centimeters. And if I sit up properly, my knees hit the corner of this table, which is really uncomfortable. So I would have to lift it up. Also, in order to put these seats on sliders, they are higher than they are on a standard size Tiguan, which means headroom-wise, I do fit, but there's only around a centimeter extra of space, and my hair is touching. So if you're any taller than me, your head might hit the roof. In saying that though, these seats are really comfortable. They recline, and in the center there is a armrest with 2 additional cup holders. There are also ISOFIX points, and they're exposed, which means they're really easy to get to. Around the back, the tailgate can be opened in a few different ways. You've got the button on the key fob, the kick to open feature, which is always a gamble to see if it'll work. It's behaving today, and there's a button on the tailgate. And once it's open, this is where the extra length really starts to pay off, because with the third row seats folded, there's 700 liters of space. Inside, there's a 12-volt power outlet, little recesses to store your stuff on either side, shopping bag hook, which actually feels real sturdy, and VW have taken a leaf out of Skoda's book with the cargo light that doubles as a rechargeable torch. And once you put it back, those electrodes keep it fully charged. And you can fold the seats down by using these 2 levers, but as you'll see when you do that,
they don't go completely down, so you have to go back to the rear seats and push them down manually. And with electric tailgates, we always try to test for safety to make sure they won't keep closing if there's an object in the way. And the Tiguan passes. Behind the wheel, there's one word to describe this whole driving experience, and that is it's comfortable. In typical Volkswagen fashion, everything is quite muted. So for instance, the steering, it's real light, but it's devoid of any feel to the driver.
The brakes work well, they have a linear response, and crucially, the amount of travel is what you would expect for the stopping power it provides. They also bite from the moment the pedal is pushed. Having driven over 700 kilometers in the vehicle, I can say that it is incredibly smooth, easily putting many luxury vehicles to shame. The ride is on the firmer side, but it pays back by being stable at higher speed and cornering well. Road and wind noise are almost non-existent, and once you've been accustomed with the German-level hard seats, motorway cruising is done effortlessly. Our most powerful 162 TSI Highline had plenty of go. Even with 6 people on board, it never felt overworked and still managed to push us all the way back in our seats under full acceleration, which is impressive. But how the base 1.4-litre engine performs may be a different story. Gear shifts with the DSG are imperceptible, and overall it's just a compliant, quiet ride.
However, there are 2 instances where this combination falls on its face, and the first one is when there's a sudden need of power. This DSG gearbox is programmed to upshift really rapidly in order to save fuel. But what that means is I'm currently doing 68 kilometers an hour and it's already in 7th gear. So if there's a sudden gap in traffic, I need to floor it, so pedal down, nothing, and there we go. So there's a good 1.5 seconds of pure delay before it picks up. And that's even more pronounced, let's say you're crawling towards a roundabout. Say you're only going 20 or 30 kilometers an hour, it's already in 3rd or 4th gear. And you see that gap, and when you floor it, you expect the car to pick up, and there's that just huge delay. It's quite unnerving, and it takes a lot of getting used to, and that's one of the biggest complaints about the DSG and the small displacement turbo. The other situation is when you're in traffic and you're just crawling, because once again, it upshifts really rapidly. So there was an instance where I was doing 20 kilometers an hour and it was already in 3rd gear. And when you're kind of crawling, the car's shaking because it's in too high. So it's constantly shifting between 2nd and 3rd, and it gets a little bit annoying. The start-stop system is really aggressive as well. It doesn't wait until you come to a complete stop before it shuts the engine off. Once you're coasting down at around 5 or 6 kilometers an hour, it will shut off. So sometimes if you're just going to a red light and it suddenly turns green, the engine quickly has to start back up. Right, there's something I want to show you guys. So right now I've engaged park assist. So what it should do is sense that space automatically, and once it does, it's going to ping me. Yeah. Put it in reverse, and the car will now park itself. So all I have to do is control the brake and the accelerator pedal. Now, that's not new stuff. Cars have had that for quite a few years now, but what I'm going to show you after it's done. Okay, so that's now finished. But what this also has is exit assist. So if I press this button again, it'll tell me to indicate and engage reverse gear. So if I do that, not only will it get me into a spot, but it'll actually steer me out as well. Look at that.
And that's a Tiguan Allspace. It's a comfortable family cruiser. It won't set your heart on fire, but it's not designed to. If you're after one, I would say go with a lower spec trim and make sure you're happy with the way the gearbox behaves in urban traffic. Ideally, see if your dealer will offer longer test drives, as time will only tell whether the car is right for you. If you've enjoyed the video, give us a like and make sure you're subscribed. I really appreciate it. Drive safe, and I'll see you next week for a highly requested video.